Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Thomas Bosen. I'm the CEO and founder of Scifeon. Today we are thrilled to bring you a behind-the-scenes look at AMSilk Digital Lab Blueprint. How a pioneering biomaterials company scaled from agile R&D to compliant industrial operations with a unified ELN LIMS backbone. Over the next hour, you will hear what really mattered in AMSilk's platform selection, how cross-functional teams collaborated, and the lessons they wished they'd known sooner. Practical takeaways you can apply to your own digitalization and scale-up plans. I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Hössel, Department Lead for Process Development at AMSilk, who will walk us through their journey and the decision behind it. From Scifeon, our platform lead Jacob J. Boysen will share the architectural and implementation perspectives, and Arne Barriere will guide today's discussion and Q&A. We'll keep the session crisp, save time for your questions, and focus on actionable insights. Thanks for joining. Let's get started. Over to you, Arne.
Thank you, Thomas, for this warm welcome, and hello, everyone. Well, from 2008 startup to 52 million in new funding and industrial partnerships with Evonik, AMSilk's growth in biofabricated silk has been very remarkable, and scaling from lab to production meant rethinking a lot about how data, compliance, and collaboration work together. So Michael Hössel, AMSilk's department lead for process development, led that digital transformation, and he's here to share exactly how they did it. I'm Arne Barriere, as Thomas just said, and let's dive right in. So, Michael, AMSilk went through a major transition because you went from R&D basically into industrial scale production now. Could you describe at what moment the data management started to become a real bottleneck in that production, and how you went about to change that?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. First of all, I'm Michael, as introduced, from AMSilk, and we are a wide biotech company, right? So we play in the field of structural protein production and leverage this for making biosilk, protein-based products like yarns and also other things. And in this regard, we, for the last year, worked hard on climbing the scales up to production where we are now. We have partners. We have, for example, Evonik, but also Ajinomoto in France, who work with us and produce for us. And during the scaling, it became very clear that a lot of data is popping up, and different people and different teams were responsible for this data, curating this data, and not necessarily was there a single point of truth where to dump this data. There were silos and islands where it was analyzed but not taken together, and obviously also the organization grew, so there was more people, more data. It was very hard to keep an overview, where in an R&D context with a small team of 10, 15 people, one or two persons can really maintain overview slides and overview Excel lists. This is not possible anymore for a scale up. It's just far too big. So there was a real bottleneck which had to be tackled.
When you started you're structuring your digital environment and R&D, there is always a question, how are we going to get about it? And there's so much fear sometimes to take the wrong decision. So how did you handle those uncertainties, and what were the risks that you wanted to avoid? And was it more about fear of choosing the wrong system, or defining too narrowly what the system should do before you had the full picture of what the company wanted to achieve with its digital solutions?
I mean, first of all, I totally get this fear of like running into the wrong direction or choosing the wrong system and then being somehow trapped in this system. And I would say that this is obviously one of the most important criteria. Yeah, locking in the wrong system will lead you in the wrong direction. But what is necessary to lock in the right system is to really understand what you need. And yeah, I have some prior experience from the past where we also implemented an ELN, and this was done, to my extent, horribly wrong. Like waterfall style planning, and then like every single detail you could detail out was already done in the planning phase. So when the LN started, there was also the pressure to everyone to start at the same time, and the expectation from the team who had to work with the system was, yeah, the system has to work like I want it to be because it was specified. Yeah, but yeah, in my experience, it just doesn't work that way. Yeah, people will. This is the second biggest risk. Yeah, people do not accept the system. Yeah, and if you do both things wrong, it will fail completely. Yeah, you have the wrong system, but also no one who accepts it. So you really have to circumvent that. And one way to circumvent this is to get the requirements right, to really reflect on what you really need, not only what you think you need, but what you really need. And oftentimes it is much more easier to have someone from the outside as a consultant who's deep into the topic, going in this journey with you. And I think together with Scifeon, we did a really good job, also because we fit quite well together as a team and a joint implementation team then to do this, to make a plan, to get feedback on this plan, and to get a lot of questions on this plan. So, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Isn't the real thing you want to build this and not something else? So ultimately, we came to a really good starting plan we could conduct. And the
So
other
you
thing is,
oh yes.
yeah, to also not make it too big. Yeah, come up with a good ramp up plan and stay as a first step. Stick to a core feature, yeah, and build this first, and then build things on top.
You prefer this focused start to these massive waterfall LIMS rollouts in other projects, where, as you said, everything is planned in detail, and that actually transitions to the next question that I had, because in your case, going as a biotech startup to becoming now an industry leader, and you have World Economic Forum recognition as being for a synthetic silk producer, so one of the industry leaders for future development of new materials. But I can imagine that you needed that to go quite fast, and therefore this is actually my next question. Implementation speed. So you just talk about this massive rollouts where everybody has to go on board and the system is not accepted and it slows down and the project basically falls apart. But in your case, you had to go fast. So what made it possible to go from your concept that you had then defined to a running system in such a short time?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to choose a proper starting point, and then to make a kind of a proof of concept on this, because this can be done fast, like a core element, and this can be implemented fast. And if you do this right, you also get buy-in from your team because they get the touch and feel, they can approve that this is right for them, and they also like visually from an interface point of view, and also working together as a team, this works out. So this is one thing. Another very important point to not lose a lot of time by convincing people to get into the system and to get the data in is to create kind of a lock-in effect. This means, try to start with something you implement, and then really has to be used in this very system. For us, it was the analytics. Like everyone needs analytical data. This is day-to-day work. Everyone sends samples to our internal analytics team and demands back the results.
Yeah.
And this is what we tackled first. So we built the system around the analytics, so to say. And then we shut down the old way of coming to your data. So it was only possible to use analytics in the system. And this is how everyone really from the very beginning had to get involved in the system and had to start with the system. And this worked very well. And from this core starting point onwards, we did really focused implementation circles. Like, okay, what's the next thing? The fermentation has to go in. The downstream processing has to go in. The spinning department has to go in. Okay, now external data has to be included. So we made it bigger and bigger, step by step. Yeah.
For me, that's a key takeaway already, that you defined a key process where everybody had to be on board, and then cut out all the escape routes. It sounds a bit, straightforward, but actually, if you have the buy-in of the team, I can imagine it really works. I think that is a good.
You still need the buy-in. You still need the buy-in from the team.
You still need the buy-in, but you defined an actionable scope, which was quickly achievable, and then you basically enforced or made that system the go-to solution, which had to be used by force. Well, that's a good insight, I take, from the practical side of lab implementations. So was there one specific moment in time when using this system, be it at the beginning of the scope or when you were further in the implementation already, when you finally realized that this would have taken us months before, and now we can decide immediately?
Yeah. So in the end, we are working in projects, and we are working in innovation projects, which have like stages. And if you come to a certain stage in your project, you will have to evaluate all the data and go on. So decision points, for example, in early developments are, I have screened a lot of different molecules. I have created a lot of data connected to these molecules. And now I want to choose the best one to go on with. And this was a very, very, a very, very good sign that I saw, that when you really are able to automatically get all this data together, and you create dashboards and lists automatically, not anymore 20 people having to work for 2-3 weeks to come up with the final data sets, putting everything in lists, putting everything together, then deciding on something. But you have everything pre-configured to be able to catch this all automatically. This was really an eye-opener, I think, also for most of the people working in the team. And here's an example on that.
I can imagine that this already helps the decision makers in the lab to be ahead of the process. And basically, I think this is a little secret you're sharing here on how you managed to come to this faster decision. So thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, I mean, you build the whole workflow. And it starts from cells and registering the cells, and the cell, within the cell, you have encoded what your produced protein will be, and all the information from there is captured. Then you have your process for production, and this has multiple steps in our case. Yeah, it's fermentation, it's the purification, it's the spinning, it's the characterization of yarns which comes out of the spinning. All this creates data, and the system now is able to do overview lists and graphical dashboards of everything you collect. And you can focus on the important KPIs you want to focus on for a certain project. And this is just one example. Yeah, when you go for biotech and you work with live cells, expression titer is always a very important topic. And then you immediately see which compound, which protein, which variant you create has the biggest titer in the system, and compare this to other to other parameters you also want to view.
When I think about other parameters, in your case, a lot of the data is run externally. Your data is not only in your lab. So you have data coming from CDMOs, CROs that are offering services to you, doing tests, maybe sharing some kind of process data. And how do you manage to integrate that also? Not only your own process and workflow are now in Scifeon, but you need to integrate the data from external sources that is run internally, maybe still even dynamically and processed internally. How did you get to the point where you could run that data into one environment?
Yeah, that's the next level then, and this is something which pops up when you get more mature, yeah, and you don't have everything internally. We are dependent on CMOs and external resources to scale up, to produce. So they create data. They have it in their formats. They provide it to you. I would say mostly also old school with as Excel, CSV files, and yeah, before we had the LN, like this was analyzed siloed, yeah, because you also can't directly compare it with your data from the lab or also from other scales. So there's an intermediate step you have to make. You have to discuss how to normalize all this data, what is comparable, and then you have to import it. And what we did to as a team together with Scifeon is to build multiple ways of importing that data into Scifeon to then have a unified database and platform to compare all this data from the different scales, because ultimately
to standardize all of those different inputs from external sources.
Yeah, it's like to importing it, building the right importers for the data set you get, because you will not be able to always to tell a CMO how the data should look like. Yeah, you will get what you get,
Yes.
and then it's on you to configure the data such that it's integrated in the system nicely, and that you can compare your data with what you internally created. And ultimately, if you want to improve the whole process on a production level, you need this level comparisons. What scales, what doesn't scale, where do we have to improve? And this is only possible when you have like a unified data set. So this is a very, very important topic, and it's also an ongoing topic for us. Yeah, not everything is integrated, but a lot of things are integrated.
If you'd have to express it in a percentage-wise, if you have externally run data before and now, you probably could say in a percentage, how much faster have you become to gather data that you need to make your decisions?
3-4 times, because it's
okay, so 400% faster. Yes,
because it's a huge effort to analyze the data first, but then you have a siloed data set for one scale, which is not necessarily comparable to the other scale. And this is another effort to unify these data set. And if you do this just once, you have a unified data set, and you have like a time stamp where this data set makes sense. But then you do another campaign, the production runs on, you create more data, and you would have to do it again and again and again. So this is the power of standardization, and to build a unified model. And Scifeon enabled this for us, to come to a unified model, which then reflects your scale up attempt. Yeah.
Something everybody likes is dashboards and visualization. So my next question goes a bit more in that direction. From, let's say, the management point of view, the people in the lab deciding on partnerships, on having to present, search for funding. How did that visualization and the data, did that also influence their capabilities to basically run or direct the company a bit better?
Once you have a system like this, I think it influences the whole company. On a scientist level, I mean, everyone is like, we are humans. We are using visualizations to make sense of data. Like, there are not so many people who can make a lot of sense of lists and data and lists, because you don't see what really matters. So this is all about the visualization, and it's really cool to have this built in, and you do not have to use, at least for the core visualizations, another tool. So that it makes total sense to have this directly, because it also creates this kind of live view on your data much more stringently. And yeah, this is true for scientists who look there every day, but this is then also true for decision makers. So, okay, what data do you have? What's the status of our QC data on the production runs we did? All this is now in the system and can be viewed live, and this is used for decision making, because we have it there. And this may be another snapshot on this. So if you take the example of QC data you have for production runs, you will need the internal data you create yourself. You will also have external data, maybe, which are important for QC, which you request from external labs. We have built workflows for these to get this attached to our production batches. But also, what is very necessarily in a QC/QA environment, that you track your process parameters. And there are different ways of doing this in the system, but basically we track everything we want to have really a close look on from the production runs. And then we make overview lists and overview graphical analysis of these things to see early on if something pops up which doesn't work. So it's kind of also kind of an alert system, so to say, that things popping up, I have to review this, I have to really have a deep look on this. That's like really a QC dashboarding then also.
So basically a QC dashboard, visualization of trending QC data. What I was thinking, we always have these stories about digital transformation, all these buzzwords. So and actually the main question of this webinar, if people are looking for a solution, we already heard, but what must be acceptance, not start too big, get buy-in. But from your perspective, you started on the bench, searching for new formulas for your materials. And as you were scaling up and getting partners on board and integrating QA and QC processes, how has the coordination through Scifeon, through the use of this platform, how has this changed, you would say, the global operations and the process you're going through now, as you're really, I'm not saying going through the roof, but as you're scaling up at a serious tempo, how did that how did that digital connection help your different parts and departments of your company?
I mean, when you want to be fast and fast at scale, you need to be sure about that your process is kind of mature enough to be able to be transferred. So your data on that has to be robust, and also you need a structured data set to reflect on this.
Preparation and standardization again.
Exactly, and because the earlier you standardize certain workflows which can be standardized, the earlier you have structured data. And it is much easier to reflect on the stability, the robustness of a process, the quality of products coming out of that process if you have a structured data set. If you have like unstructured data flying around everywhere, no one, or you have really a hard time making sense of this and deciding on the robustness of this data set and if it makes sense to scale. If you have a structured data set and a predefined way of approaching its analysis, then you're much faster intrinsically. And also you build up a databases which can then be looked up in a totally different way later, because not all questions are coming to your mind in the moment you're doing the experiment, but later on other people are coming in who have different roles and a different focus on the whole thing, and they are searching for other data, and they are looking for structured data. Yeah, for example, with QA, like, hey, did you validate this? Where's your data set, and what's the standard deviation? Can we make a specification of the product out of this and that? These people will come in as you scale. They need to come in as you scale. And if you then have a data set already ready, which is structured and which they can use, you're so much faster, because otherwise something has to be redone. Yeah?
Yes.
And it has to be done again just for the sake of making a standardized experiment and building up the boundaries of what a specification needs and stuff.
So yeah, and that's my question that I had. If you engage with a vendor like Scifeon is a vendor, a provider of LIMS and ELN solutions, one of the traps that you can run into when digitalizing is basically just doing a digital copy of what you did wrong before. So how important was the partnership? Because I've worked with lots of professional teams in my life. I've worked for big software and LIMS vendors already. And basically, professional services are always a bit like detectives. They're always challenging, they're always probing, they're always searching, and they're always not afraid to question if the goal that you're trying to achieve, if you're doing it for the right reasons. So was that also an element in your partnership with Scifeon, that they pushed you to the structured data set by asking the right questions? And how important is that when you're looking for a digital solution, that you just don't take the best promises, but really the best process?
I think this is system intrinsic, where because if you want to go in a system like this, you need to standardize. Because otherwise you will not be able to capture your data, and then you need standardized rules, and you as a company has to adopt to standardized rules. Is everyone happy with like complete standardization? Maybe no, because they like something. There's a feeling of something getting lost by standardization, but there's no other way. If you scale, you have to standardize. You have to think about what can you compare. And Scifeon definitely helped a lot with this, with reflecting on how things can be standardized. And how the data model reflecting the standardization can actually look like, because this is the data model behind the user interface is the actual thing, which is the value of the system, connecting the right things together. And yeah, this is not possible without a really good partner. Yeah, also fighting for standardization and fighting for the data model.
Yes,
Behind it, and not spoiling the data model like with the next decision, because it just seemed to be an easy decision to go that route. But having a gatekeeper also to say, no, please stick to this. This is the data model. Otherwise, you will not be able to compare and
yes.
things like this. Yeah.
What is your major lesson learned, or which pieces of advice would you like to give to a biotech company that is now under pressure from markets, from regulators, from customers, from investors, from expectations? What piece of advice would you give them when they are now going to start their digitalization journey, and they're now going to look for a digital solution, and they are starting to evaluate their processes and vendors also? What is your piece of advice for them?
Yeah, be sure about where the real pain points are within your company, and then where you can make the biggest influence with installing a new system and then structuring data. This has to be crystal clear also to have a very good and very valuable proof of concept internally. And I think this can best be done with a partner who reflects with you on what is the real pain points. And this is one thing. Then very practically, there needs to be someone responsible for this journey within the company. There needs to be a project manager who at least has a bit of understanding and also the attitude to approach this, because it will cost time and discussion to carve out what's the bare bones thing you want to have, and implement this and convince internally people to use it, to come on board, convince people of like also the vision where you want to be, and to really work step by step towards this vision. And I would say always like start early.
Yes.
The earlier you start, the easier it is to install a system, because the less mature your other processes are, and you can more easily adopt to a new system like this and establish new process. You don't have to transfer 10,000 processes which already exist to the system. You can already build new ones in such a system.
Absolutely.
And and really like create this lock-in effect. Otherwise, on the way, people will always find bypasses, because obviously not for everyone it is like equally tangible to use a system like this. There are always people who are not so keen on working in such a system. They love their island of working, and they will try to bypass it. But
Yes.
try to keep your things together by also creating a lock-in force.
That's a great final insight. I think that was maybe the most powerful one of the session. So thank you very much for this, Michael. We really appreciate you bringing the inside story from your voyage with Scifeon towards the maturing of your company now into industrial producer. And I will now pass the screen to Jakob Boysen, who will introduce the Scifeon platform in a workflow that is related to the AMSilk process. So,
yeah, thank you, and thank you for the really interesting interview here. I thought there was a lot of nice takeaways to take here from Michael. So what we prepared now is a short demo showing some of the concepts that AMSilk have been using or are using in Scifeon. This system is running in the browser, so you don't have to install anything on your local computer. It's hosted by us in the cloud, or if you need it to be on premises, that is possible as well. When you sign in, you see the front page here with the dashboards. You can define your own dashboards here. We also have a main menu on the left, including a customized menu to make shortcuts for whatever is important for you in your company and in your system. Then on the right, you see that we have this feedback button where you can always click and get in contact with the support team at Scifeon immediately. And usually we get back to you within hours. So that is when you get in. Many of our customers build their own dashboards for having the overview they would like. Maybe they have a project they are focusing on, or they have a department where they need to focus on something, or some people even have their own personal dashboards. But what we will go through today is from having a strain to doing fermentations with that strain, doing some extra analysis on samples from the fermentations, getting overview of that in different ways. So we will jump right into it. In Scifeon, you can register data in many ways. One simple way of registering data is just by registering one data entry point. This is what you can do here with strains. You could have made Excel files for uploading as well. You could upload in bulk, in lists, and so on. But this is one way. When you create strains, they will get into the strain list in the system with a lot of different properties here. This can be sorted, filtered, and so on, so you can have what you are focusing on. In this demo, we will show how we can run a fermentation using our electronic lab notebook. So in our electronic lab notebook, we have decided to try and mimic as much as we can in the lab. So you have certain steps you do in the lab, and those should be represented as boxes in Scifeon as well. It's highly configurable and customizable, so that if you have old Excel sheets with some calculations, you can probably integrate that into Scifeon as well. We won't go much into details with all of this today, so if you would like to see that, you can contact us afterwards, and we can set up a separate, more in-depth demo of the system for you. But what we will show is that in this case, we can see somebody already started the first step and also completed it. In that process, they filled out a form with which bioreactors is running in, which strain are we using. What we see here is that the experiment itself has been named automatically. Then there are strains that in this case just have the default Scifeon naming. In the interview, there was talks about naming stuff in general. In Scifeon, you can define different naming templates for naming stuff in the context they're in. So instead of a strain with this rather not that saying name, you could probably have a name that you have defined in your company so you can easily understand what you're looking at. Then you can see there was a checklist that was not followed entirely here, but the sections you see here are sections that you can define yourself in your experiments. So these informations are filled out, and when they are done that, a fermentation will automatically be created based on that information. So now you can see we have a fermentation that has been named by some rule. The strain we selected, the bioreactor we selected, the date for starting, and the inoculation time has been added as well. Then in this case, some extra conditions could be set for this specific fermentation. And again, these forms here where you can set data, it's something that you configure in your own system. So we give you a lot of different tools and mechanisms, and you set it up. Initially, of course, with help from us, but from that, our experience is that you can do everything yourself. In the fermentation workflow, after everything has been set up, it's running in the bioreactor, then usually you'd take a sample from that bioreactor once a day. And for that, we can go in here and we can use this operation for taking a sample. You can see we already did that a few times for the demo here. And for each sample, we can then go and add in a lot of different data here. So this is a mixture of some dates, a calculated duration, some aqua you put in, and some other calculations here. So you can see when you set this up, you decide what is it we would like to capture here. Maybe there are some default values, like here, the oil addition is always 0 unless you change it. There are some calculation of the oil mass, which are just using regular functions as you're used to in Excel, for example. So you can do a lot yourself here. All of the data on this line is, of course, related to this offline sample. The same goes for the next and so on. Then in this case, we can see that some calculated results have been added as well. We haven't put data into everything here, but it's just for demo purposes. But what we see here is that we could then plot the data immediately here as well, if that would make sense. So in this demo, we are just plotting the data that we have here, but you could imagine you have some standard you need to plot against. So you have a reference, plus you have the data you put in here. So you can see it live without having to first copy it into some visualization tool or something like that. So this is just one simple example of how you can go through and experiment, follow each step, and when you're done with that, you know that all data has been related correctly in the system, so you afterwards can have the data into lists and graphs. If we now say that these offline samples, we need to do some extra analysis on them as well, then the lab technician or the scientist can stay in the workflow, and then they could go and say, oh, we need to select some of the items from this step, and then do a request for an analysis. So we select the samples, we say we would like to do a request into the demo request inbox. So you have defined some inboxes for who can send a request to that inbox. We just select the demo, and then we see here that the samples are already here, and we can then select for each sample we want this analysis. If we had selected, now we only can select one here, but if we had several procedures or analysis to select from, we could select them here. Then we can send the request. I won't do that here, but I will just show you a simple analytics overview where you can see for the demo request inbox, we have these different requests right now, and we have these different analyses that are requested. And some of it is in progress, some of it is waiting, and some of it is completed. So just another example in the ELN of how we can use that for executing the analysis is this, where again, we can see in the first step, we have the sample input, we have the analyses that are related to this specific experiment. Then there might be a procedure. In this demo, it's just empty, but you can put in whatever you would like to do here. It could be checklists of what to do in the lab. It could be a formula for registering the parameters you used in that analysis and so on. Then in the end, there are some data that needs to be captured. Here we see the same samples as we saw before, and somebody started putting in data here. we see also at the end, again, we have a calculated field, so everything is related to this specific sample. What we can also see here is if we had a scale connected to Scifeon, then you could go here, select the scale, and then you could, on your scale, put the sample for measurement. It would pop up the weight of the measurement here, and you could accept that. So now I don't have that right here, so we'll just close this again. But this is for you not to manually put in data here, so you can trust the data better. So now we have both offline samples for fermentations where we have made some measurements immediately. We have additional analytics data for those offline samples as well. And all of that can, of course, be connected. So one way of connecting this is what Michael and Arne talked about, having lists. And that, of course, works in many cases. But this is now just to show how we have a list of the fermentation results, including the calculated results. So we can see we have the calculated here, for example. But we have the sample, the original sample. The fermentation is related to, if important, the bioreactor, also the strain. So in different ways, we can then filter on this list. We could join more data and so on. So if we go in here and click advanced, you can see that there are many ways of adding extra data. So we could say, oh, we have the sample. We would like the fermentation for that sample as well. So find that here and so on. So there are many ways of joining data, filtering this, and working with your data in the system. And this is just by using the electronic lab notebook. You don't have to do anything extra. This is just what you need to do. Just to take out a bit of the complexity here, again, one of the offline samples we can open here. We can see, of course, there's a lot of data if you don't know the system here, but for each sample in the system, you can go and see, oh, it's coming from this fermentation experiment. It has been used in this request. It has been used in this experiment as well. All the results registered on this sample as well. Which procedure has been used, so which analysis method has been used. And you can further also open what we call the context browser, where you can see the sample in the system. So what is related to this sample? And then we could have a look at the calculated result here and say, okay, this one, where's that actually coming from? So, okay, that's coming from this result set. So there's a result set with this result value is coming from this step, and this step is coming from this experiment, and this experiment is coming from this procedure, and so on and so forth. So this should make it really clear to you that in Scifeon, you can always follow a path to where is this data actually coming from, or how is this even related, and understanding what am I looking at right now. So the last thing we wanted to show you here is how you can take all of the data we have just been generating and looking at and showing that in Scifeon Insights. So this is just a link to a predefined demo here. But what we can see here is different ways of looking at your data. So in this first visualization, we have grouped the calculated results based on the strain names. Again, the strain names are, might have a better name in your own system, but it's just for you to see. Down here, we can see it's also the strain names, but it's tracking over time the volume of aqua in the bioreactors on fermentations. So, and then we have this last example up here, where we have time series data. So online data being generated from the bioreactors that can be put into a visualization here as well. So usually what we see our customers do is, of course, mapping offline data and online data into one visualization, and then comparing different fermentations so you can see how did it go and what should we look at.
That is actually quite interesting, because you basically showed now how the ELN is actually fully LIMS, full LIMS functionality with data management, data comparison, addition, but also data analytics in the system. So before we used to have this massive LIMS systems that needed an extra server to run the reports module because there was so many tables. But actually from this rather lightweight setup, you have an incredible powerful set of tools that, as Michael just also said, help you to visualize, analyze your data, and to take the decisions based on their data, how they're performing. So I think this is a strong last session, because we came also with the context browser, and before, where we could visually track down from step to result to procedure through original requests, all the data visually, which is also a big help, I would say.
As CEO of Scifeon, I'm very happy to hear the story about the success at AMSilk. So that was very, very positive to have a chance to share that with the world, you could say. So thank you for that, Michael.
Yes, Michael, thank you very much for that. And I would say we can say sure that we will have other webinars in the future, maybe on other platforms as well. So it's the start of a journey, and I would like to thank everybody for having participated, and see you soon for the next Scifeon event.